Welcome! I recently got the gold Cohozuna badge in Splatoon 3. That means I've defeated 1,000 Cohozunas. And so I thought maybe I should share some advice and things I've learned about defeating this chunky boy. So here's a few things to help you defeat the Cohozuna. Number 1. Stats and mechanics. I'm gonna quickly discuss how Cohozuna waves work first, as I think it's important to understand the mechanics of a wave before you can think about developing strategies. Cohozuna's health can range from 25,000 to 40,000. It caps out at 40,000 when the team reaches 60% hazard. This health is reduced following a disconnect. When it lunges at you, it deals 60 damage, meaning you can take one hit and survive. However, if it lands on you following its jump, it deals about 1,000 damage, which is immediate death. Its jump is similar to how Splashdown works and takes about 3 seconds. Its jumps are at set times, meaning you can prioritize other objectives when you know it will be activating its jump cycle. It jumps at 87, 71, 55, 39 and 23 seconds. Cohozuna targets the nearest player to it, so it's important to recognise if you want to lead it away or keep it closer to your teammates. It doesn't interact with any other enemy in the field, which means you can't get it to damage other enemies. It also doesn't have a set weak point on it, meaning damage dealt is always the same regardless of where on its body you hit. Golden eggs are used to deal damage in this wave, and they do 800 damage with direct hits. If the egg doesn't hit a target directly and falls to the ground, it deals 200 splash damage within a small radius. I think it's important to say that using the egg cannon in Xtra Waves is a different mechanic compared to throwing eggs in regular waves. The egg cannon doesn't deal the 100 damage ink explosion when thrown, it doesn't use your ink tank, and it doesn't pierce or go through objects. We'll talk more about this later in the video. Number 2. Weapon rolls. As Cohozuna doesn't have a weak spot or any special ways to damage it, the way to defeat the king is by brute force with DPS. As you can imagine, it's easier on some rotations compared to others. Therefore, it's important to be aware of how different weapons can play to their different strengths. If you have a weapon with high DPS, then your main role will be damaging the Cohozuna as much as possible. The only time this may be an issue is if you're using the sploosh or dapples, as given their great ink efficiency and mobility, you're likely the best person to cover static spawns over the map too. You can do both of these jobs, as the weapon allows a lot of flexibility with role shifting. However, it's important to recognise if your comp needs you to deal with statics or to deal with the coho. Given the speed at which you can defeat static and high HP bosses, you'll likely find yourself rerouting constantly, switching up objectives and staying fluid with roles. When given either of these weapons, you're more often than not going to be the most important person to stay alive, as you have the freedom to move without limitations, but also the ability to protect yourself in risky situations. Weapons like the Hydra and Snipe Writers should focus primarily on damaging the Cohozuna. Other really strong weapons like the Dreadringer, Tri-Stringer, Wellstring, Elita and the Tentabrella, just to name a few, can also focus on the Cohozuna when able to. However, they'll also need to flex to managing bosses, as their powerful long-range shots can deal quickly with any threat. Given that the Cohozuna doesn't interact with other bosses, you'll need to pay strict attention to the incoming spawns. Other weapons like the majority of Splatlings and the majority of shooters and Julies and all the Splatanas should also be focusing on damaging the Cohozuna when able. Given the variability with these classes, you won't necessarily have a strict role to adhere to. Instead, you'll likely fill the flex role and do what's needed compared to the rest of the team. Do they need a boss killer, or do they need someone to shoot the Cohozuna? It's important to take note of this. If you have a weaker weapon or a slower one-shot weapon like Umbrellas, Chargers or Blasters, then your main focus won't be damaging the Cohozuna directly. Instead, you'll likely find you're better served by killing bosses and using the egg cannon instead. It's also important for somebody to be taking care of lessers, especially on high tide, as they will get in the way and inflict damage, oftentimes resulting in death. If you can protect your teammates with slower, more powerful weapons, then they'll be able to damage the Cohozuna with minimal interruptions. The Grizzco weapons are all overpowered in different ways. The Grizzbow is probably the one with the most DPS, meaning it should take a role similar to that of the Hydra player and focus solely on the Coho. The Grizz Slosher and Charger are also weapons that can comfortably attack the Cohozuna, but should also be mindful of bosses that are appearing, as their shots can pierce and defeat bosses very quickly. The Grizz Dualies, Stamper and Roller are all powerful in certain ways, but may struggle to survive if you're not able to find space or safety to fully maximise the weapon itself. These weapons need a little foresight to use really well. You may need to be more proactive with enemies on the map to ensure you can focus on the Coho. The Grizz Brella and the Grizz Blaster are supportive weapons. They don't have the best power, but they're able to paint well and have good AoE spread to help with damaging everything. Sometimes you'll feel like you're given a useless, weak weapon when fighting the Cohozuna, such as some brushes, rollers, sloshers or shooters. You're still recommended to damage the Cohozuna where possible, as all damage is good damage when you're against the clock. But it's worth remembering that your abilities may be better suited elsewhere, such as dealing with lessers, bosses, keeping the map well painted, or being on static killing duty. You should also be looking for eggs to use to deal damage to bosses in the Coho wherever possible, as in combination with your weapon, this will help damage whatever's in front of you faster. Number 3. Specials. You'll always be given one special for Xtra Waves. It's therefore important that you maximise the benefits of it. The Crab Tank is by far the best special to have during Cohozuna waves, as the total damage you can achieve with it is over 7,000. It would be cool if it was over 9,000, right? Anyway, the best time in my experience to use the Crab Tank is just after the first jump at around 87 seconds. The next time Coho jumps is at 71 seconds, meaning that if you activate the crab just as the Coho lands, you'll have so much time to use the entire special without the risk of the Coho jumping too soon. This is quite early on in the wave, but this makes it much more likely that you're not overrun with spawns and can easily find somewhere to use it. Using it too late runs the risk of it being ineffective or it being cancelled. Use the turret mode and fire continuously at it for the entire duration of the special. All other specials can be aimed at Coho, however they don't have the same potential as Crab for inflicting huge amounts of damage, and sometimes are better served elsewhere, such as catching fast spawns or clearing crowds in front of you. Reef, Kraken and Splashdown can be really effective at helping you survive, clearing areas and damaging the Coho altogether. You'll want to try and combine your specials to do several things at once. Booyah and Wavebreaker won't deal that much damage to Coho directly, so you're going to get more value out of them by using them supportively, to clear areas, revive teammates, stun enemies, and to help you survive so you can shoot at the Coho more. Whale, Inkjet and Tri-Strike should ideally be used for static bosses. You'll want to use these for stingers and flyfish that spawn far away from where you currently have the Cohozuna. You'll want to limit the risk of Cohozuna being removed from an area highly concentrated with eggs or close to your teammates. The Cohozuna is slow and its movements are sluggish, meaning that if you pull it far away, it may take a lot of time for it to come back. If you notice a bunch of static spawns far away and have a special that can reach them without causing too much time loss, I'd encourage you to use the special for that. You can also use part of the special on the Cohozuna as well after defeating a small cluster of bosses. Number 4. Strategies. Something to remember is that you'll find it difficult to defeat Cohozuna with golden eggs alone. You'll need to shoot at it with your weapon too. At 40,000 health, you will need a minimum of 50 golden eggs launched at it. That is 17 bosses you have to defeat to have those eggs available. At lower hazards, you likely won't have enough bosses spawning quickly enough, and at higher hazards, you'll struggle with overcrowding, limited space, and lessers, making it harder to slay bosses quickly. Regardless of what weapon you're given, it's really important to always be putting damage on the Cohozuna whenever you can. I can understand the hesitation if you're given an ink brush or the Tetras, but damage is still damage, and overall the objective is to defeat the Coho. If you are free of enemies for a short while, then fire as much as you can into the Cohozuna before you're forced to deal with other enemies. If you're the player on the team that is running around the map to take care of statics, then it's important to start using golden eggs on bosses. You can essentially use one golden egg to create 3 more, and as it doesn't consume ink to use it, you're given a free 800 damage on anything you want. You can combine this with your main weapon or your sub-weapon, but either way, you'll want to use these to help with enemies you may struggle against. Big shots if you have a weak weapon, steelheads if you have a short-range weapon, for example. The only caveat is that any golden egg used on a boss is 800 damage not used on the Coho, so this is something to also consider. You also want to be careful with how Cohozuna moves and jumps throughout the wave. If you lead it too far away from your teammates, you'll have a really hard time bringing it back or simply putting enough damage on it. This is usually the most common reason I find for losing Cohozuna waves, a complete lack of coordination and inability to play as a team. King waves require teamwork, as one person can't do everything needed to win. You need your teammates just as much as they need you. A lot of Salmon Run can be played independently, however with King waves you'll need to stick by your teammates and work together to get enough damage on the King. Cohozuna especially is slow, hefty and has no weak points. If you let it jump to several different points of the map and you can't reach it consistently, then it's likely GG's. Stop thinking about yourself only and start thinking about what works for the entire team. Lads, I hope this helps. Let me know what you think. Good luck with your fights! If you like this video and need more advice, I've got loads of videos on how to improve at Salmon Run. Whether it's weapons, specials, maps or hazards, I've got you covered, so check them out. I'll see you guys soon.